ones going behind other ones. There's going to be some sort of depth in here. So if we're going to do a picture where it's going to have quite a few different layers in it, it can look quite confusing when you first think about it. But really what we want to do is sort of establish a couple of flowers on top, and then once we've got those, they're going to be our ones that are sort of main pieces on top, and then we're going to work the rest kind of around it. So I'm going to choose whichever right pen I can get to hand, really. I think I'm going to just choose this Jelly Rolls. It's literally sort of sitting here. As I said, it's quite useful to have a spare bit of paper here so you can just make sure that it's running okay before you start. So again, thinking about the sort of patterns of flowers and thinking about the sort of shapes that we do, it's very, very similar to doing shapes that we might have in black pen, but we're going to be doing it in white. So we're going to start off with just something. I don't want to have a completely sort of straight line of flowers. I want something a little bit sort of, with a bit more sort of movement to it. So I'm going to start. We're going to have a sort of slight slant on our composition. So I'm going to have sort of a tallest one sort of up the top around here. Let me just slightly tilt my camera up so I'm near the top. That's it. So any kind of flower shape that you fancy doing is sort of absolutely fine. I'm going to start off just very simply with a round circle as opposed to a square circle. That's a great start, Sophie. I'm going to draw a round circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect round because it's a sort of flower and a sort of natural shape. And then I'm just going to put some very simple dinosaur bumps. That's what I call those little sort of half petals. Very traditional, sort of, I always think is a little bit like sort of Mr. Man daisies. They're very sort of simple shape, but we can do something a bit more with them once we've got them going all the way around. But just a nice sort of even bumps all the way around. You can always sort of fit, if there's slightly an odd one, we can always sort of fit one in. I'm going to make that a bit larger. I'm going to expand it a little bit, but I'm then going to think about, we'll come back to this one. I'm going to put another one in because I'm just sort of thinking about the first sort of level of plants, because you've always got to have somebody's got to be first. So I want to do a kind of poppy head as well. This is going to get bigger, so it's not going to stay as small as that. So the poppy head I'm going to do, it's going to have a circle, but when I draw it, I leave a little bit of a gap at the top, so it's just a sort of, not 3/4, a sort of, 7/8 circle. And then I do like a sort of star shape. So you might want to just watch this to begin with. To get it to look sort of slightly three-dimensional, I do a couple of petals kind of coming down in it like that, so it looks like a sort of broken egg at this point. But then I take a couple off to the side, and then one, but keep the one going back a little bit shorter. And that kind of, it looks like a little tomato or a little sort of head of something, but it just helps to give it a bit of perspective. So if you keep the one at the back slightly stumpier than the ones at the front, it makes it look like it's sort of pushed back. And then I'll probably put a line through that just to make it into give it a bit more text, like a line down the middle of each one, like a little sort of star groove. And then to make this sort of poppy head look a bit more round, I'll put a couple of lines running down it. But on the left-hand side, that line's going to have a left-hand curve, as if I'm sort of drawing like a sort of beach ball shape. And then on the right-hand side, it's got a right-hand curve. So it just sort of helps to make it look a bit more like a little round ball rather than just being a flat disc. And I know they look really far apart at the moment, but eventually it's all going to be full, it's all going to join up. So the bottom of a poppy head has like a little, almost like a little figure eight or some sort of little shape like that sort of joins it onto the main stem. So we're going to come back, we're going to put the stem in a bit more. Okay, so I've got, this one's going to be on top of everybody, and this one is as well. So I want another one kind of up here. And I'm going to do what I think of as like a hogweed on this one, which again looks quite complicated when it's finished, but it's actually sort of quite straightforward to start off with. So I'm going to do some lines coming out in a fan. So it's just coming out from the same point. So I've got 2 lines there, and then 3 and 4 like that. So I just do a few lines like that one, so it's sort of coming out as a spray like that, and that's kind of like my first level of lines. And then on the end, the tip of those, just some little starbursts, just sort of going all the way around like that. And because we're going to do it in stages, it's going to look more complicated when it's finished, but we just do the sort of like first stage first. It's like doing a little sparkler. And we may well come back later and add some stronger white or thicker white to that, to the ends. But for now, we'll just do like a little star. There you go, that's 4 stars, and then just like a little sparkler. So it's great for doing fireworks. I think it's a real standard art teacher at primary school thing. We make kids do like firework pictures on black sugar paper with chalk. That's always good fun. Right, so then when I've got those in place, I'm going to think these are kind of like, because my sort of cow parsley head is a mass of little flowers, isn't it? So if I imagine that's kind of like the middle of my flower head, I want some that are coming a bit closer. So in between those, I do some rays again, but they're shorter this time. They're not going all the way up. So they're just slightly shorter. So I've got like a second layer of those that are coming in. And then when I do the sort of flower heads on these, I might bring the front spokes, as it were, just slightly longer. Don't worry if it overlaps, because it would overlap, because that's how you get this sort of mass head kind of effect. So you just then do another row kind of going around, and they look like they're overlapping, and they are overlapping, because that's how you see them. So once it starts to look more complicated, but really it's just doing the same thing again, just letting it overlap, and it becomes like a sort of head like that. And then you can leave it like that, or if you want to do another sort of layer, sometimes I'll do some, and then so they're going to come in between again, so I find a gap to drive another line through, and they can go slightly taller this time, and you can make them spread out further to the side as you like. But then when I do these stars, instead of doing face-on stars like I've done here, I'm just going to do like as if they've been cut off. So just keep them flatter, and it looks like they're sort of turned away. So you do less spokes to begin with. You do like just 3 or 4 just sticking up like that. And then you can go back round those again, do a couple more, but all sticking up in the same direction, because these are the ones that are would be slightly turned away from you, and it just gives that different sort of sense of perspective. Again, it's not trying to be a biologically perfect drawing of a cow parsley, but it just gives you that kind of feel of being like a head. And you can try, if you get really into doing this sort of one, this is how you build it up, doing a complete globe for like that sort of full-on dandelion clock, where you just do shorter and shorter stems coming round, and imagine the stars are kind of facing you, and then they're then coming down this way. We'll see. We might get to that. We might not. Now I haven't got any stalks in yet, but I wanted to get those sort of flower heads in first. So I'm going to go back now. We're going to make this one a bit more interesting than just this sort of daisy centre. So I'm going to do some long strip sort of petals coming out and round, and what I'm going to do is just slightly then put a little curve on the end like that, and I'm going to do them so they're quite overlapped, and some of them are going to come down in a curl, and then some of them, when I do them, I'm going to bring this sort of petal like that, and then put a bigger, like a round bobble on the end. And to make more sense of this, if I then do some a white line that comes down the petal, and then I bring it up the underside, it starts to look like those sort of petal, let's go in a bit closer, the sort of petal shapes on the sort of grooves or sort of striations that you get on a petal, like a sort of chrysanthemum one. So I can bring that sort of down, and this one I can bring like through the middle like that and stop it, and then that's going to come from underneath and come up like that. So I'm just going to do some long petals, and then off at the top here, they're going to be curling down that way, because they're going to be, a bit of gravity, so they're going to be coming sort of that way round. And we can put some sort of twists on them, so they might be showing an underside. So when I do that, the line's going to kind of go up and then disappear around like that. Oh, I've just gone on top of the screen. Let me move that up a bit. That's better. So I know at the moment it's like a sort of mad rabbit, but I'm going to I find it easier to kind of do clock faces. So I kind of do north, south, east, west, or 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, rather than trying to go round in order. Because I find that if I go round in order, one after the other, you tend to find that the first sort of dozen are okay, and then you find that you're sort of squishing them to sort of get them into the gaps. It doesn't have to be really regular, because I'm thinking of this as a kind of sort of chrysanthemum flower. So they tend to have sort of those curly ends on the petals, and they sort of twist around in the wind, don't they? So it doesn't have to be, it's not going to be quite as regular as a kind of daisy flower. And it doesn't matter if they overlap, because there's usually quite a lot of them clustering around the chrysanthemum. There's obviously quite a lot of petals. If you just sort of build it up bit by bit and just keep adding on another one and another one, and they can be all sort of, I think, just try and get a little curl happening at the end. It just starts to make it look a bit more naturalistic. But really, it's just a very simple sort of long sausagey shape with whatever kind of curl you can manage on the end, and then you go, oh, there's a bit more of a gap there, so let's get another one kind of in there, and let's put a twist on the end, just to sort of, and you can do that twist effect look by really just a very long shape, and then I've got like a teardrop. So if you imagine that's the underside of the petal, and this is the front petal, so my line goes up the front, disappears off there, and reappears underneath, and it just kind of gives that feel of it being a bit of sort of texture. And I can get another one in, and if I don't got room for a curl, I won't put one in, and I can just bring a line through the center, and we're just starting to see that building up into a sort of bigger flower head, quite a full flower head. And you can always do your little end bit first, like a little sort of soft triangle, and then I can do my petal kind of coming down, and then my line comes up the middle, and it just flicks over the back like that, so it starts to feel again like it's sort of turning round. And then when we're doing the ones that are fitting in between, you're not going to see them going all the way to the base, because they're kind of underneath, so you can just do that little section and just stop it against the petals in front, and that gives that illusion of it being behind and in front. And it's just, then you just start seeing the little edges and of the petals kind of pushing out from behind, so you hardly see all of them. You're just going to see a little nose of petal just sort of popping out from behind, like that. And then it now looks a lot more complicated, because we've gone and we've sort of filled each one in, but if you build it up slowly, bit by bit, going back and forth and side by side, then it's sort of across the flower, and it starts, it's not so difficult. I think if you tried to start at one side and go all the way round, I think you'd get a bit lost and sort of a bit confused by everything. Now, always think about how, with the white pen, what you're doing is adding light. So if we now want to make the petals that are on top, that come right down to the flower head, we can just do a few little lines next to the sort of daisy bump petals. So just little flick lines just coming up, and it just starts to make those little daisy bumps stand out a bit more. But just keep thinking, I'm adding light, so anywhere you want to put you want to sort of highlight it, instead of shading it, if you want to leave shade, you've got to go and then put white next to where you want it to look darker. And once you've sort of got your head around that, it starts to make a lot more sense. And so where I've got these ends that are folding over, I might just imagine there's a bit of light catching on them, so I can just put, if they get too confused, I can put a little bit of light just on the top there, just to make them stand out a bit. Doesn't have to do very much, just to sort of make them turn right. So here I can put a little bit on the bottom, and perhaps a little bit on the bottom of this one, just to kind of give a bit of difference. And that starts to look like this is sort of catching a bit of light. And I can then, with these little daisy bump flowers, I'm just going to put a little white line inside each one, just to give them a bit of interest. They're not just flat shapes. And it's very simple. It's just a line going up that daisy bump shape, but it just somehow brings it a bit to life. And with the middle, well, see that one second there, I just really want to put some white lines on the end of that so it's just catching a bit of sunlight. Yeah, with the middle, sorry, I'm getting distracted. I'm going to do some dots, but I'm not going to do them all the way to the middle. I'm going to start them quite close together in the centre. So building them up so it's quite white in the centre, and then as it comes out to the edge of their circle, I do less of them. And of course this means that I'm sort of putting a highlight in the middle and then letting it fade out. So it's just the same as using tone, like dark tone, but I'm just doing it backwards. So as I do more dots, I'm adding more light, and as the dots fade out, I'm letting it fade out to shadow. So if I come zooming right close to that, you can see how that is just done through dots. So it's just got more dots in the middle and less dots on the outside edge, letting the black paper show through, and that starts to make that look slightly round, as if it's not just a circle, but it's like a little, like those sort of daisy centres that look like little yellow cushions, don't they, I suppose? Right, so let me just get my camera out a bit further. So we're going to put some stems and some leaves coming in, and then we're going to do some more flowers, and they're going to be sort of standing behind. One thing I'm going to do before I do the stems is I want to think about just perhaps one more flower in the front. And the reason is, again, we've got that thing we have to watch when we're doing sort of patterns and abstracts. We've got a face appearing. We've got, so now I've said it, you can see it, and you go, oh yes, I've got, two funky eyes and a little round nose. So I want to put just one more kind of flower shape in here, just to break it up a bit before we do some stems. So I think I'm going to do here, I'm going to do one that looks a little bit, always sort of meant to look a little bit like a poppy. So I'm going to start that with another round circle. I've said it again, haven't I? Round circle. Another circle, but I'm going to make it a slightly squishy circle, so it isn't a perfect round circle. There it goes. I'm not starting with a round circle, I'm not with a squishy circle like that. It doesn't matter if it looks like, if it's not a perfect circle, because we don't want it to be a perfect circle. And this bit might look a bit weird when I start doing it, so I'm going to do a sort of long bracket shape like that, apparently unconnected, apparently floating in space, and then I'm going to put an edge on it, so it's like having a little boat or a kind of moustache kind of shape. And then I'm going to do another one. They can be quite random. They don't have to be particularly neat. They can just be, as I said, like sort of strange kind of boat sort of shape floating around this central one. And then I'm going to, sorry, domestic cat incident is happening in the background. So I'm going to then do two lines coming up, and then as you can see I've made a little loop like that going round, and then I can bring that down into a kind of quite loose petal shape. And then this line here is going to be coming up round and up like that. And then here again, I'm going to bring a line down, a line up, sorry, and then put a loop into it and bring another line coming around there to form a sort of boat shape. And then the final one is going to be in a more open petal, so that's going to be just sort of falling back out of shape. So this will start to make a bit more sense now when I put some lines in, I hope. So I'm going to take a line coming down here, and then you have to imagine that it's coming up, it's going underneath and then coming out over that boat shape. So you can see the difference. I've got a line coming down and then it's sort of curling up. So again with this one, it comes down the middle, and that one kind of pops up again from the underside, and then this one comes down this side, but this time it's going to pop up with a bit more of an angle. And if I do some of these lines coming down, it starts to hopefully give that feeling of a petal, and this is kind of underneath the petal, as if the petal's curling up towards us. And again, because we're working with white, so we can add light, this edge of which I was describing as sort of a boat shape, I can then put a few more little white lines coming off the edge because that's catching a bit of sunlight. And by adding that little bit of extra white along there, it starts to make it stand out, make it look a bit more like it's just catching some light. And then this one is just going to have lovely long lines coming from that center and then slightly getting wider apart as they come down to create that feeling of veins or the surface of the petal. Again, that's just going to come through right down to the end. So we've got a nice sort of generous floppy kind of poppy petal there. And the same with this one. We're going to do the same here but in reverse. So the line's going to come up from the center and then we have to imagine it's coming round the back and then curling over to that edge there. I was for some reason very tempted to say coming round the mountain, but it's sort of coming up from underneath. So each time you bring it off to that line there, you then imagine it starting again and curling up round to give us that feeling that it's all one petal. And just bringing that up and taking it up so we've got those sort of lines whooshing up. And then again, just to sort of add some light on that top edge, just bring a few little delicate lines just coming off that, and that's adding sunlight, it's adding light onto that section, it's making it stand out slightly different from the other one. And then we've got another one here. This one doesn't have a curly edge, so it just goes. And if you put a bit of a swirl into your line, so it's not a straight line, it's got a definite curve to it, and you echo that curve across the petal, it's going to give you the sense that it's a floaty petal, not just a sort of flat place that we're covering it in. Cats are being a right pain tonight. We have two in the house, and one of them has been just caught, I want to say red-handed, but he's actually been caught doing a poo in a plant pot, so has been banished, and my one has just come in and decided to attack my headphones and chew on them. So this might explain why the previous pair stopped working. Somebody needs to remind me occasionally why we have animals. Right, so I'm just going to draw those sort of lines in there. So I've done them all in one go, and then again, because this has got this curly bit here, so now I do a curly line coming down to meet each one, just sort of as if each one continues round and curls down, and that's sort of like a big, I imagine one of those sort of big blousy, sort of slightly floaty flowers, the sort that, you want to pick it and then it just falls apart before you can get it into a vase. But those big sort of translucent petals. Like that. And that's just sort of, again, hopefully just keep thinking about using the white as bringing the light. And then for the middle section, again, same as the sort of the dotty one above, but I might just do some actual circles and just put some circles all together into that center to give it a bit of texture. Just to sort of pack them in quite close together, just so then that has a lovely sort of surface to it. And often they have like little sort of spray bits that come out, and we can just do some little half moon shapes. And if I sort of line them up with the petal lines that we've got going on those stripes, that helps, I think, because then you see a little bubble of sort of black against the flower, and that's created that feeling of there being like another layer of going round the sort of center part of the flower. So let me just move that in a bit. Yes, you'll be able to see. It's slightly glaring in the light. Let me just turn the light away. Is that any better? Slightly better. Yeah, I think you can just sort of see there. And again, if you think, looking at the petals, and I'm thinking, right, okay, so thinking of highlights, I'm using a white pen, so where this sort of comes up again, you can see where I've got this sort of bump in my lines. If I just add a few little, just very light white lines. This is the moment where the white pen decides not to make a line, but I'm just going to add a few little tiny lines in between, and that again, it starts adding a bit of overall lightness. Just do them close together, and you're just adding a bit of extra. And then here I can just imagine the light's catching on the edge of that petal. And you can do a similar thing if you're not sure. You can do it very gently with some little white dots, just to sort of add some extra highlight to them, just to sort of give them a bit of extra life. And we can always go back later and add more white, but by using the little lines like that, it sort of helps to indicate that we've got sort of the petal kind of surface going on. So now we've got 4 sort of big flowers in our composition. So one of them is going to be the first, or sort of the most, the one that's going to come in front of all the others, because there's got to be one that's standing at the front. So I'm going to choose this one as being my one that's standing at the front. So I'm just going to do a very simple line going all the way down to the bottom of the page. That's obviously going to be where its stalk starts, and on the other side then just a line doing the same sort of thing all the way down like that. So I've just got one great long stem going down there, and I'm going to put a leaf. I think I'm going to put a leaf kind of down here. So to do a leaf, I'll usually do a central line first. This is going to be like the main vein in the leaf. I might make it very subtly double. Just try and do another line as close together as possible so it just forms a leaf stem, and then I'll put the shape of the leaf in. And if you do some little striations sort of up and down, like little serrated sort of shape, I think that's quite helpful. And the point comes up to sort of where, just a little bit above the central stem, and then back down again. So all the way down. There's something you can do, really simple drawings in the white and black. It just always looks really magical. And then we can do the lines kind of coming from the central stem to the end of each one of those. Just all the way along. And later on we may go back and do more detailing, because this is the sort of outline stage, but that's all we need to do for now. I'm just going to very quickly mute and slurp my tea, and then we're going to do the stem on this big poppy next. Bloody cats, honestly. Oh, that was quite hot tea. That was you do a bit more than a slurp than you were sort of intending, and that's sort of a bit spicy. Right, okay, so I think before I do the stem on this poppy head, you often get like the sort of, with poppies you get like the flower and you get the seed head going at the same time. So I think I might just do another sort of little sort of half sort of seed head kind of bud kind of thing down here. So to do that, I start off very simply with a long V, like that, as if I'm doing a beak. So I've got a long V suddenly floating in space there, and then I can do 2 sort of half moons, like a sort of long elongated Pac-Man mouth kind of coming round, just like that. So again, it's like a sort of mouth that's open. If I use the same sort of shape as the bud, so a little sort of figure 8 shape at the bottom, that's going to be on a stem. It's going to join onto the main stem of this flower. And then I'm going to put like a sort of frill that comes up, and sort of, it can be almost any shape you like. It doesn't really matter, because it's just going to be, imagine that you've got like a furled up flower inside there. And then I can do some lines. I'm just going to do some lines so they come down and disappear into the sort of mouth of the sort of seed head there. So I'm just trying to get my hands so I'm not masking too much of what's going on. And they're going to be quite closely packed together, because you've got to imagine these are sometimes you catch these buds and they're just about to sort of unfurl, but all the flower is kind of folded up like a crunched up sort of tablecloth inside. So we can do quite a few lines quite pressed closely together, and that will look like it's going to unfurl. And then we come back around this side and sort of bring these lines tightly packed, as if they're all disappearing into that sort of bud section through there. And that gives us a kind of, like a sort of, on the way to being flowered, a bud that's sort of just starting. And the stems of poppies are quite sort of a bit more wobbly. This is quite a firm stem, so this one might have a bit more of a kind of wobble to it. And I can do my second side sort of coming down like that, and then this one's going to join onto it, so just branch it across and sort of feed it in, and then we've got sort of a double stand there, and we'll put a leaf on it as well. And one thing we always have to put on poppies is they're always slightly hairy, so we can just put some little hairs kind of coming off around the bud, but they're quite sort of furry looking, the outside of them, funnily enough. And that sort of gives it, the stems are usually quite hairy as well, and they sort of catch in the sunlight as they come down. So just gives it a little bit of sort of texture. And I've got this sort of bud here, this sort of on its own, so I want to get that stem in before it gets too lost. So again, just take a stem down all the way to the bottom, and that's sort of one on its own. Right, okay, so I'm going to put a leaf in. A poppy leaf is quite similar to the one that I've drawn for a chrysanthemum leaf. Doesn't really matter because this is slightly stylized, so any kind of leaf shape you fancy doing. I want to do quite a long one. They definitely have quite a sort of long, elongated leaf. You can put more serrations in or less, as you like, really. And then we can bring a central line up the middle. There are many ways of constructing leaves, however you feel like doing them. And maybe with this one we'll do more lines coming off it so it does look a little bit different. So closer together. And again, it sounds so easy to say, but it's one of those things to remember. The closer the lines go together, this time you're adding more white, so the lighter they look. Just the opposite of trying to make something dark by putting more pen work on it. So this is going to look lighter overall than the leaf next to it. So when I take my hand up, you can see that's going to look like it's got more light, more sunlight on it than the one next to it. So we'll just put more lines close together so it looks slightly different. There we go. So just bring those in. Just very simple chevron diagonal lines, but just close together. And if you get them really close together, it looks like a sort of white highlight. Okay, so I think we've done quite well. I think we've managed to lose the sense that there's a face going here. We're definitely just sort of seeing flowers now, which is good. So, right, so I'd like to let's get something in sort of down below. So I'm going to do one sort of going here, but this one is slightly behind the others. So it's going to be overlapped by the ones in front. So we'll start with a round centre. So you thought I was going to say round circle again, didn't you? But I managed to say round centre, which is a bit more sensible. Like that, that's it. And then I'm going to do another echoing shape around it. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but roughly another circle kind of ringing around that one. And then lots of really thin little elongated U-shapes like hairpins kind of going round. And you might find it easier to do north, south and east, west. You might feel okay going all the way round. If you get into a rhythm, you can do it like this, and it doesn't really matter if it's not 100% perfect, because it's not about that. It's just about the intricacy of the shape. And if you get into a nice rhythm, you can certainly get to go all the way round. And so it joins up again on itself. So it's just sort of filled in with sort of shapes like that. And then to get more of a petal feel on these outside ones, again, you might want to watch this first shape, and then I'm just going to come up and then go out into a sort of slightly, it's like as if someone had taken a heart and tucked it down behind that round shape. So it's more of a sort of kidney shape. It's not completely sort of smooth. And then I'm going to do an echo of that underneath. So again, that sort of slight heart bump, and bring it back round. And then I think I'm going to do it so it's slightly off center. That one's come up a bit small, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to imagine there's like a second one behind, so I can just see like the next one sort of poking out behind like that. I've no idea what kind. I'm just inventing this flower. This is just an invented flower. I think will look fine. And then again, I'm going to go round and imagine that we've got a sort of second layer that's coming in and filling any gaps. It looks a bit like a dog rose, I suppose, or a Tudor rose, which is what the Tudor rose is based on. I've been watching I don't know if anyone's got Amazon Prime. They've got all the sort of Plantagenets and the Tudors and stuff on there. So I've been immersing myself in all that era history at the moment, which they're all such an unpleasant lot, honestly. Right, so I'm going to then just take some lines like we did before, just giving them a little bit of a curve, just bringing them out from the edge into the centre, just to get some texture going, and slightly slightly imagine they're pulling towards a central point. So on the right-hand side of the leaf, the petals, sorry, they pull slightly towards the middle, and on the left-hand side they kind of pull in the middle. If you haven't done that, it doesn't matter. It's just to give a sort of a sense of movement across that petal. Just some lines, and I just slightly drag them towards the centre, so and sort of slightly following the curve that you've got sort of going on. And if you do the ones that are on top, as it were, first, the ones that you can see all of, and then that sort of makes them brighter. And if you sort of look back and you think, oh, I need to put an extra line in there, that's fine. Sometimes you don't do them all the lines you want to begin with, and you can go back and add one in. If you think, oh, I've got too many on that side, then do some more on the other side. Generally speaking, I find with doodle, if you think you've done too much, do a bit more, and then you probably haven't done enough. You can always sort of do more. And again, so I'll do the same on this side. And just slightly curve them in. You can see my pen's done that running out thing. And then with the sort of ones behind, I'm going to do the lines in, but they're just going to stop. And as you sort of come around, I just let them slightly fade out. So they're there, but they're less obvious. And can you see, if you let them fade out towards the one that's on top, it just gives, it's like putting a piece of shadow in, because you're going to leave the black paper showing as if it's like a shadow. So instead of putting shading under it, it's sort of doing the reverse. So we're just going to put a few flicky white lines in, but just let them stop before they hit the other petals, and it just adds a little outline to the ones in front, and just makes them sort of stand out more. And again, we could put some dots into the middle, just to give that centre something, so it's not just a completely black space. And then we'll give this one a stem too, and it's going to have a nice short stem, because it's just a little one on the front. And we can put a leaf, and I can do a smoother leaf shape, and then just put a line through it. And again, just very simple chevron shapes. And the white means that even the very simple patterns look really strong against it and stand out. It just somehow has a sort of nice quality, and you can put a few little hairs on the stem too. I think that works quite well. Right, so I was hoping this one was going to overlap, and it hasn't, because it just fitted quite neatly into that sort of space. But we'll try and get the next one so it definitely overlaps with the sort of stem in front. So let's do. There's one sort of looks like, if you look at sort of daisies and things, they always have this moment where they kind of drop their petals and kind of put their faces up towards the sort of night sky. And it's quite nice, because the word daisy actually comes from day's eye, because they open with the daylight, so it was as if they were the eye of the day opening. So I'm going to do like a sort of sideways view one. So now we're going to do like a smile. Think of it like that, and then it's going to have a dome on top, and that gives you that sort of fat centre that you get in a daisy. And usually they have a sort of texture to them, so you can sort of fill it up with holes or circles, however you like to see them. And if you make them smaller, again, if you make them smaller, you're going to be putting more white pen, so it makes them slightly brighter. And if you make them slightly bigger, there's less white pen and more black paper, so it makes the shape slightly darker. So if in the middle of this sort of bump you have your circles smaller and tightly packed together, that'll give you sort of a highlight, and then towards the edge you can see by leaving them a bit open it makes them a bit darker. And the petals on this one are going to be sort of drooping, so you're not going to see any up here, there's going to be sort of drooping around. So I'm going to do similar to the chrysanthemum petals, but just those very sort of long petal shapes. And remember, this is behind, so if you touch a flower that's in front, just stop your drawing and kind of imagine that it's disappearing behind that line in front. And I'm going to, as these are coming around the side, we're going to see more of a kind of banana shape. We're going to see the fuller petal at the front, and as we come round, we're going to see less of that petal, and it's going to be more like a sort of much thinner, much more sort of banana-y, elongated. And from the side here, you're going to see almost, it's going to get much thinner, it's going to be almost disappearing. So again, from this one here, when it's right round the side, I'm going to almost just see almost like a line. So again, I might have another one of those just on this side, and it's just going to hit that stem, and I just stop it, and then imagine that it's going across and then popping out the other side. If you're not sure how to do that, if you sort of draw with your pen, and then as it comes to that stem, you just stop, lift your pen up, and then pretend you're drawing without touching the paper, and then put the pen down again and draw that bit in. And you'll find that your hand will then sort of take that line behind, and it's just got that feeling. So you definitely put this stem in front of this sort of daisy. And I'm going to have some overlap petals here, and they're going to just be showing the top of the petals showing through, and they're going to be quite wide because they're front on. But again, as we come around this side, they're going to get narrower, and we're going to just see just this little hint of a side of a petal like that, and then it's going to give us that feeling a bit like those sort of, I think it's Michaelmas daisies or Gerberas do that, don't they? And I'm just going to again leave that so that stem definitely comes across, and that just gives us that kind of like floppy kind of daisy feel. And which always just reminds me that I'm going to have a drink in a garden soon with one of my best friends. We can do that now. And she's Dutch, and she will tell me off for saying Gerbera because it's a Dutch word, and then she'll make me try and pronounce it like Gerbera or something. I can't say it, and she'll sort of laugh at me for not doing it correctly. Right, so that's my sort of floppy daisy. And if it's any of these flowers that you really like, do more of them. Do the ones that you like. I think, always sort of bring them in. We're going to do another one here. We'll just do one that's a round, like that in there, and then I'm going to do another circle inside to give me that kind of, I'm just going to go around and do kind of like daisy petals, but I'm going to do my clock face again, so I'm going to do 6 and 12, and then looks like a propeller at the moment, doesn't it, like off a kind of old plane, and then 3 and 9, and then in between those. And I find this works better for doing a full kind of daisy head. And I haven't done a stem on that one. We'll come back to that stem. I have not forgotten him. And if you like that sort of very spare look, you could keep the daisy kind of very spare and just sort of do those sort of petals in front. But I'm going to keep going around and doing again. So then I go around, and again, as I sort of come to the next layer, you can't see all of the petal. So you just let it sit behind the one that's in front, and I'm going to tuck that behind that stem so it's starting to overlap, and keep going round and moving just so we just see tops of the flower, the sort of petals in between. So that's another daisy flower, and again I'm going to put a little bit of texture, just a line going through each petal, and just let it fade out towards the end of the petal, so it's not going all the way up in a stripe. It's going to just be a little flick of highlight and coming through. Just each one, just very simple. It's so simple, that little line just through the petal, but it just brings it to life and just makes it just look that little bit more interesting. And then we've got that sort of one there, so we've got one here. So I want to get another one in here, and then we'll start getting some stems in. We'll decide who's going in front of whom. So I'm going to pack another one in here. I want to do one sort of a bit like a grass, I suppose, like an autumn or something like one of those. I don't know if you know it, but there's that one called Timothy grass that has like a sort of bullet with kind of sticky out bits all the way around it. And it's just a very ornamental. It's a wild grass, but it's quite attractive. So I'm doing this shape here, which looks like a little foot, I suppose, like a, when I say foot, I mean like a dinosaur footprint. So that's just that very sort of simple round bottom, and then 3 little bumps sort of coming off of it. And then I'm going to do a next layer of petals, but I'm thinking of being packed sort of like like a sort of wheat head or something. They're quite packed together. They're not sort of going to open out like petals. They're going to come, so I do 3 and then 2 and then 1, so they're kind of packed in together quite tightly. And then we can add some line work again, just 3, very simple, just coming right down, just to give that a little bit of form, and then again inside each one of those, and coming down. And then they have sort of like quite mad, like sort of Sputnik sticky out bits that come sort of out on the side, and I know it looks quite crazy, but they're sort of like these sort of heads. So I think we'll do some more of those sort of in, and then they have like a little line on the end, so it's sort of like a little seedy bit that sort of sticks up. And this sort of thing is where if you've got a different weight of pen, a sort of thicker pen, you can go and put a little flick of your thicker pen on the end like that, just to make it, give it a bit more. And you can use those again if you need to fill in an area of white, just to sort of bring that up and make it quite sort of bold and bright. And then they often have these really fancy leaves. So I'm going to do a stem now, and this stem is going to come down and it's going to hit that flower and stop like that. And then we need to carry it on down so that it's got the feeling of it being part of the field. So again, if you bring your pen down, lift it up, bring your hand down as if you were drawing but without touching the flower, then pop your pen down and you've got a gap. Same thing, when you hit that leaf, lift it up, continue drawing the line, put it down, and then that continues that line all the way through. And then for the other side, exactly the same thing, drawing down, stop there, lift my pen, trace it across the flower, down, and then up and down, and that just makes sure that is sort of running all the way through that flower, and we're starting to get that field of wild grass in the twilight, which is what I'm kind of visualizing. And then for these really fancy leaves, I'm going to do a big long tear shape that comes up and round like that. And I know it looks quite mad, but when you actually start looking at some of the plants out there, some of them are absolutely crazy, some of the shapes they grow. So I think anything's fair game, really. And then I'm going to put a line through it, like we've done with the other leaves, and chevron pattern again, chevron pattern, and down one side, and then just joining up on the other, and just that sort of chevron shape then immediately sort of starts to locate that as being a leaf. It's saying this is how we define a leaf, we're having these sort of shapes on, and it makes sense even though it's like a crazy grass kind of shape. Right, so that's sort of one of those in there. I might do another one of those up here. I quite like those sort of ones, but we're getting nice and packed now. So we've got another stem here because we've got this daisy stem there, so we want to get that stem coming down. So let's do this one. So I'm going to take it, I want to get it behind this sort of shape here. So I'm going to draw it down. Where I've got that thin line, I'm going to just draw across it because it's a single line. It's not really going to stand up. And then I'm just going to have it shadowing down behind that second one. And we want it to kind of really pack in and start looking like all those sort of very dense plantings. So it's got to come down this side. It's got to appear. Here it is, appearing down this side and then disappearing down again into the bottom. So, and then we've got this chap here as well, haven't we? So he's got quite a long stem. But I'm going to do a flower here, I think, before I put that stem in there. So let's do another kind of ground-dwelling, sort of smaller flower. So a nice little round centre, and then some daisy bumps coming round. Just very simple, but we can just build up some layers. And then I'm just going to do a double-sized one, but again put a little heart-shaped bump. So it's taking up the space of two of those small bumps and just sort of ducking in a little bit round between them. And like that. So then it's like a little small, and then maybe like, I'm thinking it looks a little bit like a clover, doesn't it? Like a clover leaf, but just again put a line in to make those look a bit different. And then where I've got these two double bump flowers, I can do some little white lines spraying up off that surface. And again, it's just helping to draw attention to that shape below just by using that extra bit of white in. And these, I'm thinking of these as being like wild violets or those sort of little tiny flowers. Then let's bring this big daisy stem down, and that's going to come down. It's got to again cast that leaf, so I lift my pen up, put it down again, bring that down in the same way, lift it up and bring it down. And then we've got my little flower. Let's do a little flower, the same style. I'm going to another one sort of here, as if they're maybe sort of branching off together. So again, just with the round, the little circular middle, and then dinosaur bumps. And this one, it's hiding behind the other one, so just let that shape disappear off behind that poppy stem. And same sort of one coming round, and then a double width heart-shaped flower, and again disappears off behind there and kind of comes round. We might just see a tiny hint of it kind of peeping around the corner like that, and a line through that middle flower petal, and then again some white lines coming off that just to sort of bring those through there, just give it a little bit of difference so that the petal stands out. Again, adding white, making it bright. And then, so I can then do maybe a little curly stem. Let's put a curl onto it, and then put a curl on this one. That could be quite, you know, ooh, look, quite a bendy curl on that. And then bring them round again to meet. And they can have a little tiny leaf coming up from the ground and sort of going in with a chevron pattern there, just to sort of bring those sort of through. And then I've not forgotten that we've got our big cow parsley, sort of our spray kind of flower up at this side, so I think we should probably deal with him next. I think I'm going to put a few more kind of in round the back, so I'm just going to again have a quick tea slurp, so I'm going to mute for a second. Right, so let's just take a step back, moving our camera back a little bit so we can see where we are. Yes, so I want to kind of come down off that with a straight line. I'm going to imagine that there's like a join up here, and I'm going to push another one kind of coming out from that one. And then this main stem, I've got to imagine it's going to come down, join in a V behind this sort of poppy head, and then it's going to continue on down. And it can be at a slight angle. That's fine. So that's going to come down under there. And then I'm going to do another one of these sort of spray heads up here. But I'll show you how we can get looking even sort of rounder. So again, if we do our first, we do a row of sprays first. So it's about 5 or 6, I suppose, sort of coming round like that. And then we're going to do the stars on top of this one. We're going to do the sideways stars. So we're only going to see them from as if they're from the side. So we're not going to see the full star on each one. Like that. And again, if you've got your thicker pen, you can go and do, you can put in a dot around on the end like that. That's, oh, I've just gone off the camera, so you're not seeing that. Let me come in a bit closer. There we go. So we can do a dot on the end of each of those stars, and that makes that a bit sort of stronger. That's quite a nice thing to do. So we're going to then continue those round. Like that, and then we can put the dots on. If you do it in stages, it's much easier not to get lost in the mass of the sort of flower head that we're building up. And then we're going to do the next layer, so they're going to come a bit shorter. And they're going to come in between. And then they're going to have they're going to have the stars, but we're going to have them so they slightly come a bit further round. So the last two are kind of more horizontal. Like that. We'll keep going round. If we just build it up in layers, then you won't get too lost, but you'll get that lovely kind of all over head kind of feel. Put your dots in on the end. If you haven't got a thick pen, you can just do like a dot of white in your thin pen. And then we're coming closer to the camera, as it were, because they're going to come spread out. So we've done another row, but this time they're shorter again. So just try and get them going in between into a gap so you can see the ends. And this time, when we see the stars, we're going to see the full star. So we're going to have north, south, east, west, or, and all the compass points in between on each one, because they're coming forwards towards us. So we'd see more of those together. And don't worry if it starts to look quite, confusing, because you do just see this mass of stars when you look at them. As long as you're doing them sort of layer by layer, then you can hopefully not lose track of where you are and just let them overlap and cross each other. That's fine. There we go. So that's sort of that layer. Then that's getting denser again. And if we wanted to do another layer, I'm just putting my dots in. We can do, when we do the next layer of lines coming out from that center point, just do really short ones, hardly any at all, just sort of only about, you can see, just sort of a millimeter or so long, and then you would still see the star shapes in the end, and they would be, I'm using my thick pen to draw them in, so you'd see stars still coming off there, but they're really low down to the stem, and they're kind of much more crammed in, and you get that more kind of like globular feels of all kind of packed in, and that sort of helps to make that look a bit more round, and it really does look like a lovely sparkler kind of in there. And these ones are quite hairy too, so we can put some little barbs coming off the stem, and that looks quite effective to kind of give it that, because hogweed is that stuff, or something. If it's hogweed, you mustn't touch it because it's quite allergic. Gives you a lot of allergy issues. Right, so we're getting more and more packed into our sort of field there. Right, so now I'm going to do another one of these sort of grass heads. I want them to come up in here. So again, it was a sort of like a broken Easter egg or a dinosaur's footprint, depending on which description you go with. Like that first, and then 3 petal bumps, but packed quite tightly in, so they're sort of all coming together in a point. And then 2 and 1, so they're in a kind of tier arrangement, like a sort of pudding. And then, what puddings are you eating, Sophie? Honestly, well, obviously I'm imagining some enormous Knickerbocker Glory ice cream kind of affair. And then I'm going to put a little line up through each one again. So the fundamental shapes of all of these are actually really simple. It's just a sort of repetition that makes them and how we put them together. And then it's just got these sort of Sputnik wands coming off. Like that. So we've got our strange, and then we've got our strange leaves. Now this is going to overlap a little bit with this big stem here because it's behind, so it might just disappear behind that stem and then come out again and come round, and then in the same way the next side and come round like that. So it's got its sort of arms sticking up, and then bring that curved shape down the centre, that sort of curved central vein, and then just the chevrons. And let's get close together. Remember, to get close together they look whiter, and if they are further apart they look a bit darker because you're letting more of the paper show through. And if you get really into this sort of white on black, have a look at photographs of jellyfish underwater where they're all luminescent, and that's a great inspiration for these sort of drawings. It's quite tricky to sort of get them to work at first, but when you do, it's really satisfying. Right, so then I'm going to do a stem coming down off here. So again, hit the daisy in front, lift my pen off, imagine I'm drawing, pop it down when I meet the edge, hit a bit more line, up again, down the leaf, down again, draw it down, hitting that flower up, through the flower, and then back on the paper, tiny bit up and down, and then disappearing down into the ground. And it's the same, and then it's much easier to do the second side of that stem, even though I've missed a bit there, all the way through, following that one down. Right, so our sort of twilight meadow is getting more and more full of sort of shapes, and so I've got I think I want to get a smaller flower down on this side here, because we want to have something that's taking up this space here. So we'll do one, but we'll do like a sort of poppy one as if it's sort of from the side. So if we do a big half moon shape, and it's going to go behind that stem and out the other side like that, so it's quite a big sort of shape. And then I'm going to do a line coming up like that, as if it's coming from underneath, so it's curving towards the left. And then this side again, sort of curve it towards the right, but it's going behind, so it's got to stop and start again. And then I'm going to just give that a sort of wibbly petal edge, any sort of shape I like. And then this edge for this one, I'm just going to make that a tiny bit taller, and then bring that through and make it wobbly so it disappears sort of round, and it's going to go around that side, wobbly kind of line coming round like that, so it's sort of touching. And then I need to put a line in here to make that into an edge and just join that up here, and it's sort of become like a sort of tulip, or sort of a sort of very sort of spread out tulip, but they're sort of like those wild Welsh poppies. And then I can put a little ball underneath for my join, and then let's make it stem, although it's short, let's make it quite curly. So I'm going to bring it into the bottom, so it's going round at a sort of angle, and bring that through. And then I'm going to do some lines again. So we're going to go from that center point up, but if you kind of try and take it up to where you've got a crinkle or a kind of fold, it really helps to give that feeling of it being sort of light petals, those sort of veins. And then coming from underneath, remember to avoid the stem and come up to the edge and bring those sort of up. And again, if you do them sort of closer together around the sort of towards the edge, it kind of adds a bit more to the structure. But you can see I've got that nice edge, that bend there, so I'm going to take that line down from there and bring that into, so it sort of starts to make it quite petally, and bring that sort of through into there. And then in the inside, I don't want to do lines disappearing in completely. I'm just going to, can you see where I've got like a little wobble there? I can just put a little, like a little flick just going down like that, and it's just indicating that there's a shape going on the inside, but not putting too much white in, because I don't want to distract from the outside. And you can always put a few more little ones in, just tiny little flicks off that edge, just going down, that sort of hints that there's stuff going on inside. So that's that one. That's quite a nice sort of big shape in there. Right, okay, so we're getting quite a few flowers packed into here, and it's getting to look quite busy. So I think I want something, I'm going to put something now that's sort of peeking in behind here. Or I think I'm going to do some lines on this daisy. I was just thinking that. So again, just a few lines. If they just sort of peter out slightly, it doesn't matter so much with this. I'm doing more of them on, again, sort of on the petals that will be on the top, and I might just do some on just the tips that sort of show through underneath. If they're quite sort of light, if they're sort of running out a bit, it sort of can work quite well actually. They're quite subtle, just to sort of bring those out in. Right, so I've got my shape here, so I'm going to do a flower kind of behind here. I'm going to do just quite a simple, again, a centre and another centre inside. And I'm going to do like a second kind of ring going round, but it's not going to be a perfect circle, and I've got to, so I'm going to make it slightly wobbly, look, just sort of going round, just avoiding the stem and all the other bits, because it's definitely behind all these others. So it's starting to fill that space in. So it's just sort of like doing a circle, but doing it wobbly, I suppose, so it's not like perfectly accurate. And then again, where I've got those wobbles, if I just take a few lines going down towards the centre, it doesn't take much, but it just starts to give it the feeling of petals and that sort of lightness. And then I can go back and put some bumps in around that ring, and just going around to give that a bit more texture and a bit of surface. And then for the central bit, I'm going to do like a crisscross pattern, so like doing vertical lines first, just sort of filling those in, and horizontal lines. And again, if you put a slight curve in them, just helps to make that look like a round sort of centre. And it's got to have a stem, so let's do a curly stem. So it's going to be quite curly all the way that way, and then curly back down all the way till it comes out again. And we can get quite wild with all these shapes all sort of mixing together and interlacing and sort of turning around. So that's another one there, and then I'm going to put a leaf on it. But again, it might go up behind, it's going to disappear off behind one in front. But it'll just start to get that feeling of them. And where you've got one in front like this one, you might think, I don't want to get them too mixed. I don't want to get them. I want to make sure they sit. They're not too mixed up together. So I can go back onto this one and put some little white lines in, just to make it brighter, because it's coming to the front. It's in front of that one behind. So by putting these lines on, we're adding light, we're adding white. We're just helping that one stand out a bit more against the ones behind. Right, so where should we go now? Oh, I think we should probably get another poppy head in somewhere, because I quite like this sort of shape here. I might do a bit more work on that one. How are we doing? We've got about 10 more minutes. Right, okay, so let's put a poppy head in. Oh, I think over here is sort of where it's going to go. So I can do one in the same sort of way. So remember before, my hand's going to be right in the way there, so let me just move the camera a little bit. See if that's a bit easier to see. So we do a circle, it's disappearing behind that poppy, and it's going to come around, and it's not going to join up. So it's like it's got a little gap at the top, if you remember, and then we do 2 long star shapes with a bit of a curve coming down, and then 2 on the side, 1 either side, and the top one at the back is short and dumpy, and that just sort of makes it look like looks a bit like a tomato as well at that point, but it sort of gives it that sense of perspective. And we've got the little bump, sort of figure 8 shape coming into there, and then we've got the sort of beach ball lines on it, so one that's slightly curved up the middle and then greater curves as we go round. Just that one, and it just sort of gives it that sort of globular feel. And I'm going to bring it down, take it behind that one, that bud in front, and bring it down all the way, and finally take it off the page. So we've got another one, and then it had some lines, doesn't it? It had some lines coming through, in and out, and bring that sort of round. Right, and if you want to get a bit more detail onto your sort of seed heads, I'm a massive fan of poppy seeds heads. I think they're just some very satisfying things. I might just double up that line so that it makes it double. Well, obviously it would make it double if you doubled it up, dear oh dear. So let's get the end of session, can't you? And I can just put a few more, but just very faint lines, sort of coming down like that, just to make it a bit more interest going on with it. Now I could keep on adding. I could certainly add a few more flowers into this and having them really sort of packed in and overlapping. But sometimes when I've got quite a good amount of flowers in, I probably put a few more. I try and get some more in behind. This is when, imagining that I've got all the flowers that I want in, I could then go through with my thicker pen and kind of add some extra white detailing. So where those edges and points are kind of coming around, they're catching the light, I can add a bit of extra boost to my highlight with my acrylic pen. If you're already using acrylic pen, then you can go back and add some extra just to sort of build it up. Some of the shapes that I've got already there, but just adding the thicker line just to kind of bring them out. Like in the center there, I'm going to add some dots of acrylic pen, or again I can add some more extra white, whatever white pen I'm using, just to sort of bring some more concentrated highlight in, just to sort of see where I want to bring a bit more emphasis. So where that edge is turning around, I can add a bit of light to that, and then maybe add a bit of extra all the way through. And then like on let me see, on this daisy flower here where I've got these circles, I might go in, if I want to make some extra highlight, and just do some dots of white on that. Like with the stems, I sometimes quite like to put dots down some of the stems because they look a bit like a surface and a texture. I think it's quite nice to break them up a bit and add some detail, so it's not just straight lines kind of coming up, and add some extra little bits in. And then so you look, I'm seeing this one here where I've got these nice lines coming down, this one at the bottom. I'm going to use my extra thick acrylic pen just to add some extra weight at the top of those lines. It doesn't take much, but it just adds a bit of extra transparency, extra sort of interest. And just imagine they're catching a bit more light and sort of run the edge. And sometimes I find if you just put like some dots of what, like extra large dots where their sort of edges come, it just starts to add like a little bit of almost like sparkle. And like along here, if you just put dots, and I find if you do some bigger ones in the middle and then let them fade down into smaller ones, it just starts to look a bit like sort of highlights, and it really sort of adds a nice quality as if it's just catching the light a bit more. So I've got some larger dots here, and then they're going smaller kind of along the edge, just as if they're picking up on sunlight as the sun is sort of fading. And just again up here, and just a row of dots of getting smaller like that. And I might decide that one of these stems I'm going to colour in white almost completely, so maybe this grass stem, I can just bring that all the way through just being white, just so it's slightly different from the others. And same as this is this grass as well, I can make these stems look a little bit different just by using my paint pen to colour them all in whiter, just so they're something different. And this, I've got this little one here. So where I've got this sort of very plain sort of black shape, again, just some little flicky lines. So just put your pen on and flick it just off the edge, but do all the flicks as if they're being pointing in towards the centre of the flower, because then that starts to sort of, that's the way the flower is growing. So by doing your lines in that kind of way, it's helping to get across that that's the way it's grown. So just put it on and flick, just to add a little extra texture on those petals, just so they're doing something a bit more. And one final leaf shape that I'm going to try fitting in. I don't know if it'll, you won't see it in quite its full glory because it's going to be behind other ones, but another leaf shape I quite like is to do a really, oh look at that, it's not working just in the last minute. Go on, I'll try and grab a different one. This one's obviously sulking. So they're sulky creatures, white pens. I do it like, imagine the sort of ace of spades, but really elongated, so it's like a long shape, like a sort of minaret, I suppose. And then I can put some lines, and if I get these lines to sort of radiate out, and each one is going to be pulled into that corner shape, so as it goes, it gets more and more elongated. And then on this side, I'm going the other way and being pulled into that way as well, sort of filling round into that shape. So that's quite a nice shape for sort of filling out backgrounds and adding more kind of light to. Right. I'm afraid I think we're going to have to stop about there, but I hope that that's sort of starting to really look now like, I can almost not get it all in one go. There we go. It's starting to look like a sort of meadow. Why is this camera not sitting still? Sit still. Oh, obviously needs to be tightened up. Let me come out a bit further. Oh, you. Right, don't touch your wallpaper. It's going to have to be doing. Right, I will scan it and send it through to so you can see it without my camera being hopeless. And I think hopefully that has got that feel of all these flowers clustering together at sort of twilight. We're just catching the last rays of sun. And I hope you really enjoyed working on white on black. I find it very relaxing. I hope you weren't totally daunted by it. It is really quite absorbing, isn't it? It really does sort of take you in, you know. And I say it's great for doing abstracts one, and I hope it's sort of giving you a taste for it. And if you ordered a pack of paper, you can. That's going to be your Easter, is doing all these lovely white on black drawings. But if you are a Pinterest person, if you Google